Welcome to the Dug in a Pub podcast, where I share thoughts, stories, and conversations about my life and my journey post-suicide attempt.
I'd like to begin with a fact.
So pull up a stool and let's see if we can change the world.
I'd like to begin with a fact.
Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Dug in a Pub podcast. This is a very special episode. I interview Eliza Rickman, an international performer based out in California. Actually, I broke our interview into two chunks. Our first chunk, we talk about music-related topics. The second half will come out on episode 8, and we're going to talk more about anxiety and stress and relationships. I'm going to start this episode off with the first song of Eliza's ever heard, called Pretty Little Head. I heard it first on a podcast called Welcome to Nightvale, and she also toured with them on several occasions, toured with Rasputina is another band I've seen her with. So here it is, Pretty Little Head.
Drop it down to the bottom. Butterfly flow, flicker, soar to the top. Kill for the thrill, cut it, stick it where you got 'em. Circle rolling under, running red to the stop. Where's your mother? Fall down dead. Dirty mind, dirty mouth, pretty little head. I wish you were here, I wish you'd make my bed. Dirty mind, dirty mouth, pretty little head. Ooh. 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 Oh, sister, bring your head and push it down below. Catch yourself a look and let it go, go, go. Wanna have your baby, but I'm so, so slow. Don't you worry, honey, 'cause I can't say no. But where's your mother? Fall down dead. Dirty mind, dirty mouth, pretty little head. I wish you were here, I wish you'd make my bed. Dirty mind, dirty mouth, pretty little head. Ooh. 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 Take a breath, my heart, and hold your tongue. It's just a cog in the ear of all my love. Take a breath, my heart, and hold your tongue. It's just a cog in the ear of all my love. Of all Where's your mother? Fall down dead. Dirty mind, dirty mouth, pretty little head. I wish you were here, I wish you'd make my bed. Dirty mind, dirty mouth, pretty little head. But where's your mother? Fall down dead. Dirty mind, dirty mouth, pretty little head. I wish you were here, I wish you'd make my bed. Dirty mind, dirty mouth, pretty little head. But where's your mother? Fall down dead. Dirty mind, dirty mouth, pretty little head. I wish you were here, I wish you'd make my bed. Dirty mind, dirty mouth, pretty little head.
So, just so you know, I did start recording.
Hmm.
How the hell are you? We haven't talked in ages. I think
I
actually since
know.
you were here in for Thanksgiving.
November. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm doing great now. Um, you probably wouldn't have known it at the time, but when I was there in Wisconsin and when I saw you guys, I had just started taking antidepressants and I was
Okay.
in a pretty rough spot, but
Yep.
yeah, came out of it. It's been a slow process of like getting my mental health back together.
I've only interviewed one other person. That's the guy who makes my fezzes.
Uh-huh.
That interview is much more Jason talking
Yeah.
because I don't know him, and I wasn't sure how to. That was the first time we used this TriCast thing, and
Yeah.
so hopefully, as I do this more, I'll get better at it. And the whole. I don't know. I hate to call them interviews. I try to think of them more as conversations.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah, the podcast has been an interesting process. The first one drove me nuts because
Hmm.
I was gonna record and then just get it perfect, and then
Yeah.
that didn't work. So I erase it, do it again, erase it, do it again. I'm like, this is gonna take like 2 years to do,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, screw it.
Yeah.
So I did the first one, got that out. Second one, I just sat in my closet. I had my topics written down. I just spoke about the topics.
Hmm.
If I made a mistake, I just paused,
Right.
chunked that out later, and but you recorded things, so you probably have a little bit more familiarity with all that crap than I do.
Yeah. I love the editing feature. Oh my God. I would be a nervous wreck if we were still in the era of recording to, analog tape. That's too much pressure for me.
Yeah, okay, we're gonna do this once. What?
Yeah.
And every time you redo it, it costs you X number of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. I love to copy and paste. I love to, I love watching what engineers can do, taking like little bits out and pushing things around, moving things forward.
So
Things you couldn't do with tape.
being a movie buff, I thought there was a change in the industry when everything went to, from digital or from film to digital, from an editing standpoint. Because when you had to shoot on film or record on tape, you had to do that one shot, and if it didn't work, you just kind of, it's kind of all we can afford to do, so you move on.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering, being in the recording industry, how has that changed? Has it made it easier to? I would think it would make it easier to get what you want as a final product because you can go in there and digitally manipulate, and you can you can sing a phrase a couple times and pull the one you want out. And
I didn't get into recording. I wasn't even I didn't even consider myself a professional musician until after everything had gone digital.
Okay,
So I don't have the experience to compare and contrast. I would say though that for sure from my experience and just from like what I know from talking to people who have been in the industry for longer, the fact that everything has gone digital and that anybody can purchase, say, Pro Tools and record in their house,
yeah,
that has changed a lot of things. Has made that's made it so that there are even more bands releasing music than there used to be, which, in my opinion, has sort of decreased, not decreased the value of music, but I think people think, bands are a dime a dozen because they kind of are
yeah,
now. And also, things have gotten more difficult for professional engineers. And this is something that I think I don't have in common with a lot of my peers, is that I refuse to like
do absolutely everything myself. I really want to hire people who are the best at their craft. And so I don't
Yeah.
record myself on Pro Tools. I go to an actual engineer. And that, as you know, has cost me a lot of money and sometimes pain
Yeah.
and tears. And it's been difficult. But the end result is that I think that despite my being like a DIY singer songwriter, my one of the engineers I've worked with was teasing me, and he was like, "I know you think you're like all indie and stuff, but you're actually like Lady Gaga. Like you are a perfectionist." So yeah, I still pursue kind of the old school route, even though everything has gone digital, and it is easier to just self-produce and self-release.
Yep.
I don't do it all by myself.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of hiring the experts.
Yeah.
I have no problem, if I can do something myself, great. Like with this podcast, I was going to edit it and I was going to try to find some music, but then there's a band in town, Oh My Love,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, "Hey, can you guys record intro, outro, and bumper music for me?"
Yeah.
And they did, and they sent me the stuff, so that's what the music is. And then there's a guy who runs another podcast who I was asking a lot of questions of. He's like, "Well, just send me all your segments, and I'll edit it together and send you the finished podcast." I'm like, "What?" like,
What a
"Yeah."
sweetie.
I'm like, "Just send me beer money." I'm like, You're gonna take the hardest part of doing this away from me? All I have to do is give you beer money?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yes, please."
Yeah.
But so I guess what I should do, since we've already kind of started, so I guess how would you, people ask me when I say, talk about you, because, when I like a band, I tend to talk them up whenever possible. I say pimping, but that's a bad word these days. But
Is it?
I don't know. I pimp the artists I like. I pimp them
Yeah.
hard. I say, "Hey, you got to listen to this music," or I share their music on my Facebook page or events or whatever. Because, like you were saying about, there are so many more bands out there now because you can buy Pro Tools and buy a good microphone and go in your closet and record vocals and then use GarageBand and build your own music around it. But with that oversaturation, it's good bands can get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
In the past, good bands just kind of rose to the top.
Right.
Like I've told you, I honestly think you have one of the best singing voices I've ever heard.
Thank you.
And I'm not just saying that. I mean, just after I first heard you on the weather from Welcome to Nightvale, you were like 3 notes in, and I'm like, "Who is this woman, and where did that voice come from?" And just, it was a strange place to find it, because here's this podcast, and they do this weather thing, and honestly, you're the only artist that was ever on the weather who I went and tracked down the music for.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a Dessa fan, but I saw Dessa when she played Madison and was doing the weather for them. So, Welcome to Nightvale has brought me to my favorite artists.
Yay.
But, that's why, from a fan standpoint, I try to talk about the bands I like because of that.
Right.
And I guess what I wanted to ask you to kind of back up to where I tend to go off track a bit.
That's okay. Me too. Me too. I have a spaghetti brain.
So, when I tell people about you, they're like, "How would you describe her music?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
I say her voice is phenomenal. I mean, just you, and I think I've told you this, you and Regina Spektor, my 2 all-time favorite voices.
Thank you.
But I'm like, what kind of music would you call it? And I'll look over at Brett. Brett, help me with this. And she's like, I'm not going to say plinky. But, so how would you describe, if someone asked you, and I hate categories. I mean, humans like to categorize, so it's just got to be a question you hear all the time. How would you describe your music? What kind of categories would you try to... Because it doesn't just drop into some. You have to shoehorn it into categories.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. despite the fact that I've been doing this for a really long time now, and that is a super fair question, and it's the question I get asked the most, like I was just at the bank the other day and I was depositing these very small royalties checks. One was like $6 and one was 10, and I was like, what the hell are these? I usually get paid like, via direct deposit, but I had these little royalties checks to take to the bank, and she ended up asking me about my business and what and then inevitably what kind of music is it, and I still don't know what to say, and I know that that has not helped me and my marketability, and possibly, I don't know, maybe I sound like a conspiracy theorist right now, but I feel like that has certainly not helped me to garner like mainstream support or, a record label or management or anything like that. I haven't figured out a catchphrase. The best I can do is say that it fits under the very broad category that I suppose I would call alternative folk.
Okay.
Not
Yep.
really folk in the traditional sense. People seem to use the term folk music these days if the instrumentation is not electric or electronic, So
Okay.
there's no electric guitars in my music, and there's no synthesizers. It's all kind of um, the instrumentation is very classically influenced, um,
Yeah.
and acoustic. Yesterday, I was at a memorial service, and the lady next to me started asking what my music was like, what kind of music, and she
hmm
goes, "So what do you sound like? I mean, does it sound like Adele?" And I was like, "No," but I mean,
Yeah.
it's a perfectly reasonable question. You hear musician, that can mean fucking anything.
Yeah.
Singer, that can mean anything, any style, any genre. And I hate to name drop, but I do kind of have to give some perspective. I have to at least mention my influences, or usually what's easiest is if I mention the vocalists that I get compared to the most frequently. So
Yeah.
that would be Kate Bush, Tori Amos. I do get compared to Joanna Newsom just because she's kind of
hmm
like a quirky lady that plays a harp, a classical instrument. Um, and I love all three of them, admire them very much, and I'm very influenced by Rufus Wainwright, who I would consider to
hmm
be kind of whatever the genre is. I would consider him to be in that genre.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't just say singer songwriter. It's true. That's what I am. That's what I do. I sing. I
Yep.
write songs.
Yep.
But when you think of the term singer songwriter, you think of, bless their hearts, they are a dime a dozen here in Los Angeles. You think of the dudes with the acoustic guitars playing at Hotel Cafe singing like super literal lyrics about how
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
feel. And that's not what I sound like at all.
Right.
I have a little bit more of like a theatrical component to what I do. So most of
Yeah.
the music ends
Absolutely.
up being kind of whimsical or haunting. And then, if I explain that to people and they're still confused, I totally get it.
Yeah. It's like there's a local musician that I like here in Madison, and like, so what is he like? And it, there are some people that are easy to classify. So
Yeah.
imagine Darius Rutger and Dave Matthews had a love child,
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
you wind up with Mark
hmm
Croft. I mean, that's kind of his styles and the way his voice is and the way he plays guitar. And yeah, and I tell people Regina Spektor when I talk about you, because I listen to some of her music, and she is quirky. She makes barking seal sounds on a song or two.
Yeah.
And she does these really truly non-traditional things. And I think the reason she became famous is she got two songs put into 500 Days of Summer.
Yeah.
And I think before that, I don't think she was on the radar too much.
Yeah.
So now I've been reaching out to all my people in movies, like, so there's a singer.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's some of that seems to be the luck of the draw with which
Yeah.
artists get, pop and which ones don't. And
hmm
I know you meant
Yeah.
I asked you once about was it America's Got Talent?
Yeah.
And I think what'd you say they didn't think you were commercial enough?
Yeah, so this was when I was first starting out. Um, I had been busking, street performing at the Third Street Promenade in Santa Monica, California.
Mm.
That was like my full-time job. I went and did that pretty much every day for at least a year. I would wake up at 5 a.m., put
Oof.
on an Eliza Rickman costume, load up my little cart, you know those carts that like bag ladies have,
Yeah.
all my stuff at the time very conveniently fit into one of those. So this was just when I played toy piano. That was the only thing I played when I would street perform. Yeah, I would put my toy piano in there and a little fold up keyboard bench and a small battery powered amp. And I would get in my pickup truck. I used to drive a purple pickup truck, and I would drive out to Santa Monica, and I would load everything out of my car and wheel it over to sit in front of the Coffee Bean, which was a very popular spot to busk. And I would sit there and I would wait until the lunch hour because I knew that was when it was the busiest. But it was early enough in the day that there wasn't a lot of competing noise.
Oh, okay.
Holy shit, what was the original question?
That is, I know we were just talking about the America's Got Talent thing.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Yeah, I have spaghetti brain, and sometimes it's like it makes for fun conversation, but then I have like an Alzheimer's moment, and I'm like, wait, what? Where am I right now? So I was exposed to a lot of foot traffic during that time, and still, like, actually, a lot of people who come to my Los Angeles shows, they are people who originally encountered me through street performing, which really warms my heart. Like I
awesome.
developed a very small but very devoted fan base locally just from doing that. And there were so many people who would come up to me, when I was taking a break between songs, and they would be like, "You're so great that you should look into being on America's Got Talent. I could totally see you on that." And I was like, "Oh, no, thanks, but no." And then eventually, for multiple reasons, I stopped busking, and I kind of just took that shit indoors, and I started touring all the time. And right around then, my body had to make some major adjustments, and I got very sick at the beginning of that. Like, just kind of always had a really bad cold. And I'm not the type of singer that can just keep at it when I get a cold. It completely ruins my voice. Like, I think because of I do a lot of like falsetto and head voice. And so if the cold progresses and it gets into my like nasal passages, I'm done. I can't do anything. And yeah, right around the time that I started touring, and I was on the West Coast, I think I was hightailing it back down to Los Angeles to lead music at a church on a Sunday, and I was trying to get from the Bay to Los Angeles in one day, and I felt terrible. By the end of the drive, I had an ear infection, and I didn't realize you could get those when you were older than like 4 years old, but I got one. Didn't realize what was happening to me, but just everything in my face just started kind of shutting down. Like my eyes were kind of almost swollen shut. I couldn't sing. I led the music at church the next day sounding just wretched. It was really embarrassing. And I think it was on that day or a couple days before, I had gotten an email that I thought was a joke. I thought it was phony, and it said it was like one of the producers of America's Got Talent, and they were asking if I would come in and do an audition by special invite. And I was like, what? And I responded, and I said something to the effect of, "I'm really flattered, but I really don't think I'm right for your show. I'm not mainstream at all." But someone at the Promenade, it turned out to be real, and someone at the Promenade, someone who had seen me, like, knew somebody who worked for that show, and they told him about me. So I did end up going in and auditioning with the fucking ear infection.
Oh, no.
Fortunately, at that point, I was on antibiotics and I was on my way up, and my voice sounded okay. But yeah, they had me go into a room at a hotel. I don't remember which one. There were a ton of people. Like, I don't know if they probably weren't all people who were invited. It was probably like just one of those generic casting calls, and then a handful of us were invited. I don't really know how that works. But there were a ton of people in this waiting room. And there were like, it wasn't just musicians. It was people who were talented at this or that, like dancing. There were definitely some singers. There were some like jugglers. It was nuts. And I remember looking around the room and just being struck at how many people were there who I could see it in their eyes. They really, really wanted it. Like they really wanted to be on that show. To them, it was going to be devastating if they didn't be on it.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting called in to play for 4 judges. It was not the same judges that are on the televised portion of the show. It was kind of like a screening process.
Yep.
And I don't think any of them were celebrities, or if they were, I didn't know who they were. But they had me sing a cover song, and I had my toy piano, and I sang the first half of Brand New Key. And they stopped me, and they loved me. Like, I knew they weren't kidding. I knew they weren't, full of hot air. But they were like, "You're wonderful. We love your voice." And I mentioned that I had an ear infection, and they were astounded. That, like we would have never known. You're really fantastic. If everybody who's part of this screening process thinks you're right for the show, you'll hear from us within a week or 2. And I never did, and I knew not to take it personally. Like, just based on what little I've seen on that show, they had, and this goes for most of those types of shows, like The Voice and American Idol. I was not mainstream, so I wasn't like obviously super marketable or something that would be a huge popular success. But I also wasn't like bad enough to or weird enough to make fun of on the show. I was just kind of like somewhere in between.
Yep.
And so I didn't take it personally. I think my mom might have been disappointed that I wasn't on the show, and some of my friends were like, "We really wanted you to be on that show." Because it's true, the exposure would have been good, but I get it.
That's how artists live, right? By exposure.
Yeah. But I was, if anything, I was kind of relieved, because I was like, oh, good, they're not going to make fun of me on national television.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, I remember when Puddles was on.
Puddles.
When he was on America's Got Talent.
Yeah.
And he came out, he did the first song, I'm like, oh, nailed it. And when he came out to do his second one, like 2 notes in, I'm like, oh, that's the wrong song. I don't know if he picked it or if they picked it for him out of his catalog, but I'm like, I looked at Brad, I'm like, nope, he's done. This is it. And that was it. But yeah, to be in one of those, talent shows, I'm using air quotes.
Yeah,
because a lot of it is just popularity. Like so many of those kids on those shows, they get so far because they're precocious. Yeah, and they are a standout because they're 4 years old and they're singing Aretha Franklin.
Exactly. And I wasn't 4 years old. I was a very, respectable enough 27 at the time.
So I know you started working on the covers album again?
Yes, finally. I owe my Kickstarter backers a long update, and that's something that I'm going to do today, actually. Sit down and type that out. That is something I've been very nervous about some trolls, maybe some people not getting it, but I have to do it. I have to do it. I mean, I owe them at least that much. I went silent about that project for a really long time. And I also think, unfortunately, a lot of people don't read the updates, so maybe they don't even realize that like 9 out of 11 songs they have had in their inbox for like years.
Yeah, I saw that message. I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
Like, oh, right, we do. That's right. But,
Yeah.
I I look at any Kickstarter or any of those campaigns as I give somebody my money, and if they do what they said they're going to do with it, awesome. And if they don't, especially if it's an artist, I don't lose sleep over the fact if I don't get
Hmm.
an album or whatever out of it, because even if I gave them $20 and they went and
Bought dinner.
bought them, yeah, they bought
Yeah.
dinner or lunch or whatever,
Right. Right.
I don't care. I'm still supporting that
Yeah.
artist.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people when they give money to a Pledge Music or Indiegogo or whatever, they look at that as very transactional. And they're absolutely campaigns that are 100% transactional. There's a set of headphones that I was supposed to get, and they got $12 million, and now they've declared bankruptcy.
Oh,
And
dang.
so I will never get my headphones.
Yeah.
And those are transactional. I gave money, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to get a widget at the end,
Mm-hmm.
and I expect it. But for the ones I've done with artists, it's like there's an artist locally, Oh My Love. Actually, they don't exist anymore either. They
Oh.
just changed their names. It was that Christmas I had some extra money, so I sent a few people some extra money. I think I sent you some that Christmas too. But
Probably.
and I was talking to them like, yeah, Christian wanted to go for dinner. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Go for a really nice dinner with it. That'd be great.
Yeah.
She's like, no, we're going to use it for our music. I'm like, if you want to go for dinner, I'm not going
Yeah.
to feel bad. It's
Yeah.
like, if I can help, I'm very much about helping music because we need more of it. And I think, you've done a couple of Kickstarters, and I've probably, a lot of my, I want to say extra money, discretionary spending goes to musicians and artists because, as we were talking earlier, the music industry is so fragmented now that it's really hard for a musician to make it these days, to be a professional musician, unless you're touring all the time. And it's really hard to tour all the time unless you have a fan base. And it's really hard to get a fan base because there are now 1 million musicians instead of 10,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just tricky. So when I find a musician I like, I do what I can to help more people find their music.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I guess that was what I was going to ask, because I know you're working on the covers album.
Yeah.
So then what's next?
Figuring out when it can be released. I'm not willing to set a release date because I actually have some traumatic experiences from doing that with my other two albums. By like setting a release date and starting to plan album release tours around that date, and then something, at least one thing goes terribly wrong, and then I'm like losing sleep, not sleeping because I have to like fix something in a mix, scramble to change something. Like, for example, with my first album, I set a release date that was not very realistic, and I booked this huge 3-month tour all over the country around it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd had the track listing and all the songs recorded for quite a while. And the manufacturing company that printed out the CDs, retro, I know, printing out the CDs, they were eager to go ahead and get sort of a head start because the quality of their printing was really good, but they also took more time than, say, disc makers. So I told them to go ahead and print out the cover art for the album. And then as soon as the actual music was mastered, I would send that over too. So they printed out, 1,000 digipacks for my first album with 12 songs on it. And then we got into mastering, and this song that I'm still totally in love with, I still haven't figured out exactly what was going on with the mix. But essentially it was not releasable. There were sonic flaws that were very obvious. It wasn't,
Mhm.
something that I was being nitpicky about. It was like once it got mastered, there were all these weird popping noises. It kind of sounded like somebody
Huh.
took bubble wrap and was like popping it in the background. I was like, oh no, that can't be on my record. And it's a very sparse and haunting song. And so it's just super exposed. And
Yeah.
I remember trying to get the guy to like master it a different way, and it still sounded like shit. And I called my
Mhm.
mom sobbing, and I was like, we have like a week or 2 weeks before the release.
Oof.
This song sounds terrible. I've already spent $800 or $1,000 printing out the digipacks, and they all have this song listed on the track list. And she just handled it. She was like, okay, have them print out 1,000 more where that song is not included, and I'll pay for it.
Wow.
But it's like you never know what's going to go wrong, but shit is going to go wrong when you're in
Always.
post-production. And because of that, I have been extremely reluctant to set a release date. And there is a mix that I've been working on off and on for a while of a Billy Joel cover of all things that Jherek Bischoff arranged for me. It's just
Oh,
my
nice.
voice. It's like a dozen Elizas, and it's gorgeous and powerful.
Mhm.
And it's supposed to be the closer on the album, and I absolutely refuse to drop it from the album, but it's got kind of a similar thing going where there's some sonic stuff that needs to be, I think, EQ'd a very specific way
Mhm.
for it to be releasable. So right now, I mean, that's one of the main reasons why the album has been kind of stuck for a while. And it
Mhm.
also costs me money to go into the studio and
Yep.
work with someone on trying to figure out how to fix it. So it's like I don't have unlimited bank funds.
Right.
So yeah, it's just been really tough, and the process has been a lot more complicated than I ever could have expected.
Yeah, and like I've told a lot of artists, like I don't want your music until you're happy with it.
Yeah.
Because if you put something out into the wild and you're unhappy with it, then
No.
everybody's going to listen to it. Like, no, because now they're listening to that track, and that track has that thing in it that drives me nuts. And it's done when it's done.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah,
But,
and I hope that I hope all other Kickstarter backers at least partially agree with that. I could have made something very easy that was just me and a toy piano, but I wanted to make it marvelous. I
Right.
wanted it to have just as much energy and have it be just as exciting, if not more so, than my previous two albums.
Well, there was a woman a while ago who was complaining about the fact she gave you $20 and didn't
Yeah.
have an album yet, and I said, "You need me to send you $20?"
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll send you the $20 back. I mean,
She was a bit ridiculous also because I had just released the album. So the Kickstarter was, as you know, it was mostly for my second original album. And that took like a little over a year to record and produce and do all the post-production and release. And during that time, Jason Webley and I decided to do the covers thing afterwards because it was just too much to try to do both at the same time.
yeah.
And so I was like towards the end of, or I think I was at the end of my album release tour, and I was in a hotel room in Italy, scared out of my mind because I had actually just escaped from this very controlling Italian man that I was sort of seeing. He scared the shit out of me, and so I had to like run away and hide in a Best Western. I found an American chain hotel, and I was trying to figure out how to get home in time for Christmas. And it turned out it was going to cost me like $2,000, which was a huge chunk of what I had just made on that entire tour. And I posted a Kickstarter update, kind of apologizing for the slowness of delivering some of the goods, and that the covers album or the covers EP was no longer an EP, and that was going to take some more time. And that's when that girl piped it up, and she was like, she said something about well, personally, I would never back one of your projects again because I see that you're vacationing with my money all over Europe. And I was like, oh, bitch, no.
Yeah.
That is not how that works. This is
Yeah.
not a vacation.
And it got my hackles up. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll give you $20 back.
Yeah.
No, like I was saying, if I give money to somebody, it's theirs. If they want to get tattoos, if they want to buy 100 gerbils, whatever,
Yeah.
it's their money. I've given that to them. And for me to put strings on it, no,
Yeah.
I can't do that as a person. Well, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have another Eliza Rickman song coming up in just a minute. And the second half of this interview will be episode 8. So there's one in between. So thank you for listening. Please spread the word. Tell your friends. If you have questions, if you want to be a guest on the show, Doug@duginapub.com. Episode 7, I'm going to go a little bit more into depth about transactional relationships. Somebody asked me to expand on a topic I hit in episode 5. So I thought I'd do that right away. And then episode 8, like I said, will be the second half of the Eliza Rickman interview. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Start with goodbye, stop with hello, catching our breath out in the cold, lover on fire, thrown in the mire, scandalous man, name me your plan. We'll start with goodbye, stop with hello, never a hand, hardly to hold, big city sway, move with the day, wanting it bad, ever returning home, 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 home. Start with goodbye, stop with hello, finishing fast, order so slow, chasm of mind, child in the mine, cavernous eyes, what's your design? We'll start with goodbye, stop with hello, breaking my heart, cracking your code, down in her lap, sat on her knee, quivering tongue, flicker with unnamed love, 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 Ruining the moves when you were mine and I stood face first, clutching my coat, but your house on the hills is got in the way, and it seems to me we've run out of words, and I'm ruining the moves when you were mine and I stood face first, clutching my coat, but your house on the hills is got in the way, and it seems to me we've run out of words to say. We say, 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 we love, we say, we love, we say, we love, we say, we love, we say, we love. Start with goodbye, stop with hello, catching our breath out in the cold.